welcome to CEC Gurukul lecture. In continuation with the series on sociology of religion, in today's lecture we are going to discuss on a very important topic, that is the dichotomy between the body, which becomes religiously important, and that is the distinction between the right hand and the left hand. Here the Robert Hertz article is being prescribed in the reading, and as mentioned earlier in the lecture, this reading is prescribed in the course on religion and society for BA multidisciplinary course for first semester. So let us try to understand the preeminence of the right hand, a study in religious polarity. So Robert Hertz in this article basically critiques social hierarchy discussed as a meditation on handedness. This is a provocative look at why humans who are biologically almost symmetrical have spent millennia treating the right hand like loyalty and the left hand like a commoner. So there is a kind of a mindset which has over the period of time given too much of superiority to the right hand and less to the left. Here in this article, by looking into this religious distinction or religious polarity, he is trying to understand the cultural construction of inequality. Robert Hertz uses the metaphor of right versus left hand dominance to expose arbitrary privilege in human society, mirroring class division, gender roles, and power structure. So basically, he will be drawing this metaphor from the body to the social construction of inequality and how the right kind of symbolic of those who are powerful, those who are superior in position, and the left is symbolic of the subordinate, of the marginalized. So let us first try to understand the nobility of the right hand, and then we will understand why the left hand is considered as less important. So the nobility of the right hand isn't just about physical strength. It is rooted in deep-seated cultural and religious symbolism. Across history, the right hand has claimed its status through: number one, the sacred and the divine. In many religions, the right side is the side of the God, the saved and the pure. To sit at the right hand of the Father is ultimate seat of power. The second reason for the importance of the right is the rational and the active. Historically, the right was associated with active masculine principle, order, reason, and the sun, whereas the left has been associated with the passive, the feminine, the moon, and emotion. So these have been the cultural construction or meaning assigned with the left and the right. The third reason for the nobility of the right hand is the social contract. We generally shake hand with the right, swear oath with the right, and salute with the right. It is the hand of legal agency and social identity. The fourth reason is honorific language. Right means correct, just upright. Example, right, righteous. So this is coming in from the grammar. Left implies wrong or omnious. Then when we have understood why we prescribe a certain kind of loyalty to the right, we try to understand the servitude of the left hand. Robert Hertz argues that the servitude of the left isn't a biological accident but a social necessity. Here is how the left was demoted, and the first reason is religious dualism. Humans have an ancient tendency to divide the world into two parts or dichotomous pairs: the light and the dark, the good and the evil, the sacred and the profane. So if the right is sacred, then automatically it becomes that the left is profane. The second reason is the sinister label. The left becomes the hand of the occult or the illicit. Even the word sinister comes from the Latin word for left. The third reason for the servitude of the left hand is the role of auxiliary. Because the right is designated for high status tasks, so we are generally doing the better or the sacred work with the right, and therefore these eating, blessing, writings are all assumed to be done by the right hand. The left was left to be relegated to the dirty work, the hygiene, heavy lifting, or simply holding the object while the right and the hand performed the art. So, even in terms of the way in which the body parts were performing action, the distinction between the right and the left was established. The fourth reason for the servitude of the left hand is historical prejudice. Asian taboos, that example Roman associated left with ill omen, Islamic and Hindu customs avoid left hand eating. The fifth reason is forced subordination. It's relegated to support roles, holding, steadying, assisting, never staring alone. Left hand notes lefties are often cured or punished, enforced right handed supremacy. So, we have a right to understand by looking at the royalty of the right and the servitude of the left, there is a organic asymmetry which will then get assigned with a cultural meaning. In this article, Robert Hertz is highlighting a classic tension. Is our preference for the right hand a biological destiny or a social choice? He compares the right hand preference to other historical justification for hierarchy like Aristotle's views on slavery or Victorian views on gender, noting that humans love to claim their social prejudices are actually laws of nature to make them feel permanent. Hertz debunks the myth that the right handed dominance is natural and inevitable, showing its cultural construct reinforced by society to justify hierarchies. And therefore, if he is not accepting it as natural, he is critiquing the organic justification. Robert Hertz targets the dodge used by all elites. Claiming inequality is physics, that is nature, not nomos, which is convention or culture, to block reform. Parallel slavery, that is Aristotle Greek's barbarism, sexism, that is women's naturally inferior, and now-handedness. So, these are three instances where nature or destiny, biological destiny, was assumed to kind of justify the inequality, whether it be in terms of slavery or gender. And here the third is the significance of the right hand. The common view is that right hand supremacy is biological fact, not changeable custom. Robert Hertz concedes one solid anatomical finding but pivots to undermine it. He acknowledges that most persistent scientific explanation is cerebral dominance. In the vast majority of human, the brain is asymmetrical. So, he compares the right-handed preference to other historical justification where we have talked about the idea that the brain is divided into two parts, the left and the right brain, and the 90% of the people who are right-handed are because of the left cerebral hemisphere is larger or more active than the right hemisphere. The second theory is of the Broca connection, where Pierre-Paul Broca identified that the center for speech and motor control are predominantly located in the left hemisphere. So, the left brain human, because of the active functioning of the left hemisphere of the brain, it typically develops into more complex manual task and language. The right hand becomes the preferred tool. Robert Hertz argued that this is overstated. Nature's testimony is ambiguous, like in race or gender debate. While there is a biological slight edge, the left brain being more active, society takes the small gap and stretches it into a massive chasm. To help visualize the comparison of the natural versus the social hierarchy, he considers three historical parallels. So, when we look into the comparison of the hierarchy types with the two kind of debate, one is the claimed natural cause and the other is the modern scientific or social reality. So, when we look into the handedness, the left brain dominance and the organic asymmetry is the natural explanation for the dominance of right-handedness. In reality, 90% of humans are right-handedness, But the evil stigma of the left hand is purely cultural. The second hierarchy type is gender. Here the natural cause is the natural inferiority or biological fragility. So when we talk about gender and the subordination of women, most of the explanation was that since the women are biologically born in a particular type, they are supposed to be subordinate. Now, what is the social reality? The difference in physical strength exists, but cognitive and leadership capacities are equal. So, there can be a physical difference between man and a woman, but then the there is no gendered understanding of cognition or leadership quality. The third hierarchy type is race. The natural cause is ethnic superiority, that is example Aristotle Greeks versus barbarians, and the social reality is the genetic diversity within group is greater than between them. Superiority is a social construct. So in all the three cases we see that the natural explanation for the dominance of a particular category is not in itself explainable, and therefore what makes it common among the three is that there is a social construction of superiority or dominance in all the three, whether we talk about the handedness, gender and race. So therefore, to address Robert Hurt's point about the testimony of nature, here is how the numbers actually break down into human population. So the right-handedness roughly 85% to 92% of the global population, and that is why also why because there are a lot of punishment, there is kind of lot of stigma attached to people who are not right-handed or they are using the left, and therefore they are kind of considered as deviant. So over a period of time, through training, through practice, people shift from left to right. So the left-handedness figure turns out to be roughly 8% to 15%, and ambidexterity, that is those who are able to use both left and right equally, are extremely rare, about 1%. Then we have the figure for language dominance. Even among left-handed, about 70% still process language in the left hemisphere, showing that the left brain right and the right brain link isn't a perfect 1:1 rule. So this drawing in from biology or explaining that one is left because the left brain right because the left brain is more functional is actually not up to the mark, and it does not justify why there should be a difference in the two. So why it falls short? So why does people kind of accept the understanding the right hand is more dominant? And here we look into the Robert Hurt's rebuttal. He doesn't reject biology, but shows it's insufficient to explain cultural dominance. First, he says it's not universal. 10% left-handers prove asymmetry isn't absolute. Animal shows mixed pattern. Then there is a degree of mismatch. The brain asymmetry is subtle, 5 to 10% volume difference. Cultural bias amplifies it to 90% right use. Next, trainability. Children switch hand easily. Society force right-handedness, example via schools, tools, through trainings, through the labeling and stigmatization. So by the time the children grow up, they kind of shift, the training makes them shift from left to right. The fourth is symbolic overlay. Right is always symbolically equated to the sacred, to the active and to the male or the masculine. Left is equated to the profane, passive and female in myth worldwide. For example, Bible, Maori ritual. So this dichotomy has already been culturally constructed that the right is sacred, all that is masculine, sacred, pure belongs to the right, and that which is profane, female, weak belongs to the left. So society doesn't just accept right hand superiority, it actively suppresses the left, prioritizing ritual purity over utility or reason. Robert Hurt's example of children having their left arms bound is a literal manifestation of a metaphorical process. We see across three levels of human training where the left is suppressed and the right is allowed to dominate. The first is physical repression. As noted with Netherlands Indies example of Victorian practice of tying a child's left hand behind the back to force right-handed writing. The second example is linguistic stigma. We bake this clumsiness of the left into our very words. Gauche, which is French for left, means socially awkward. Sinister is Latin for left, means evil or threatening. Dexterous is Latin for right, means skilled. So there is a linguistic superiority to right. The third illustration is of the well brought up child. Robert Hertz argues that the etiquette is often just a set of rules designed to prove we can control our profane side. A child who uses the left hand is seen as undisciplined because they haven't submitted to the social code. So, the norm is that you become right-handed and you're trained to do all the sacred and the dominant work with your right hand, and if you are not, then you are not normative. So, if you are not normative means you are a deviant or you have not been socialized or trained according to the norms and codes of the society. So, therefore, the education of asymmetry talks that while biology gives the right hand a slight head start via the left hemisphere, human culture turns that head start into a total monopoly. While the biological wiring is fixed, the intensity of use is a social choice. By refusing to exercise and train the left, we create a self-fulfilling prophecy. The left becomes incapable not because it lacks the nerves, but because it lacks the practice. So, all the importance is given to the right, it is receives the right training, it is into action. So, if something is left without any kind of unattended or no training is done, or if you don't use it, then over a period of time it becomes of no use. So, it becomes worthless. So, that is what is happening. If left hand is not used, later it is kind of assigned the meaning of being incapable. Robert Hertz calls this veritable mutilations, not anatomically harm but functional sabotage, like denying education to the less favored. So, he is comparing it with the say the education of where children from the poor background or from economically backward community, a weaker section, do not receive the right training, right education. As a result, they remain out of the literate population, and therefore, they are kind of, there is a chance of veritable mutilation taking place. So, this in a way reinforces symbolism. Right becomes active, sacred, aristocratic. So, those that receive the training are able to improve, are able to become skilled, and therefore will become more active. One that is neglected will become subordinate and passive. The fourth is social control. It creates visible inequality mirroring class, gender divides, challenges its risk upheaval. The irony is that left hand could rival right with equal training, as ambidexterity experiments prove. So, if the right was considered at par with the left and both were given the equal training, then individual would become ambidextrous, that is, they were able to use both their hands with same amount of effort. The example that he gives us is the blacksmith hones both hands for efficiency. Society hobbles one for propriety, like the aristocrat fears peasant literacy. So, then there is also the modern reversal, the rise of the southpaw. Interestingly, the attack of innovators that Hertz mentioned have largely succeeded in the last century. In the 90s, we see left-handedness was a defect to be corrected. So, it was kind of a lot of punishments were given to people who would use their left hand, and therefore, it was kind of completely a defect to be even subject to medical treatment. By 2020s, left-handedness was seen as a competitive advantage in sports like baseball or boxing, and is linked through some time overstated to different types of creative problem solving. So in the 2020s, we also started hearing about debates of people who are left-handed are more able to, more cognitive or are more blessed. So there was a kind of a change in the discourse. We have moved from repressing the left to accommodating it. Left hand scissors, desk and guitars. However, it's been just accommodated. There is no kind of a reversal, or there is no kind of a egalitarianness in the use of the two hands. However, the honor of the right hand still persists in our daily gesture. We still shake hand with the right, and the right remains a synonym for correct. Robert Hirsch separates biological capacity from social morality. He argues that the left hand's weakness is manufactured disability, a physiological mutilation rather than a natural one. He points out that when the social taboo is lifted by necessity, the left hand suddenly matches the right in skill. So it's just kind of again metaphorical. So those that are marginalized, or those who have not been able to utilize the best resources, will remain kind of on the lower side. If equal amount of training is provided, then they are able to rise up. So similarly, he kind of draws this metaphor to the handedness, where the ambidextrous proof tells that if equal training is provided, then both the hands would kind of be useful. And that he tells us that that lot of fields in which the ambidextrous use is evident. The first field that he gives us an example is musicianship. A violinist left hand performs the most complex, high-speed digital work, while a pianist requires near perfect independence between both hands. Then we have surgery. A surgeon must be proficient with both hands to navigate the human body safely. Third, adaptability. If a right-handed person loses the dominant hand, miraculously learns to write and create, proving the neural pathways were always there, just dormant. So Robert Hirsch's most provocative point is that right-handedness is an ideal. He compares it to circumcision, a physical marking of belonging to a correct or sacred group. The left brain usually dominates, giving the right hand a slight natural edge. The society demands that this edge becomes a monopoly. When a society punishes a left-handed child, the slap on the overbold hand, it isn't trying to make the child more efficient. It is performing a ritual of conformity. The offense of being left-handed isn't that you are clumsy, but that you are irregular or rebellious against the social order. If anatomy cannot explain why we hate the left, only why we prefer the right, what can? So if you look into the ideal versus the fact, Robert Hirsch suggests it comes from dualism. The human need to divide the universe into two opposing camps, the right, which is the sacred, the left, which is the profane. The right is integrity, the path of life, and social sanction is reward. The left is disorder, the path of death, and the social sanction is reproof. So therefore, the religious polarity, he shifted the lens from biology to sociology and specifically to theology. Right hand supremacy isn't about habit, it's coerced via sanction, demanding sociological explanation as an aesthetic moral imperative rooted in mystical belief. He is arguing that right hand is not merely a biological fact, it is a totem. The human body is not just flesh and bone, but a map into which society projects its most fundamental religious anxiety. To understand why we treat the left hand as paralyzed, we have to stop looking at the muscles and start looking at the sacred profane dichotomy. So, by looking into this whole idea of how we assign a symbolic meaning to the biology, we'll be able to understand inequality in society. So, this is important to read Robert Hirsch's The Eminence of Right Hand, the Religious Polarity. With this, I come to an end of this lecture. Thank you.